the most dominant running back in the NFL over the last 2 years, walked out of the Eagles' first OTA on Wednesday and went straight to reporters with the willingness to talk about everything, my friend, and what he said covered 3 completely different topics that define exactly what is happening with this team right now. He talked about the friend who may be on his way out. He talked about the new system being installed around him. And he talked about the work that still needs to be done by a roster that finished last season below the expectations that a Super Bowl champion franchise carries on itself. All of that in a matter of minutes in front of the cameras, with the clarity and authenticity that have made this player one of the most respected leaders in the Eagles' locker room. He addressed the trade nobody wants to see happen but everyone knows is inevitable. Explained how the Eagles' running game is going to change in a way that will require a real adjustment on his part, and made clear why he still believes this team has everything it needs to get back to the level of excellence in 2026. If you are a true Eagles fan, hit that like button and subscribe right now, because what the best running back in the NFL said today is the blueprint for how this team is thinking about its future. When the Eagles finally put the full roster on the field together for the first time this season, there was one question every reporter present knew had to be asked of the most vocal and most honest offensive leader on this franchise. The question about A.J. Brown, about the trade, about what happens to a roster when one of its most important pieces is technically present, but mentally already somewhere else. And the running back who answered with the perfect combination of personal loyalty and professional acceptance that only someone with the maturity built over years in the NFL can deliver is Saquon Barkley. Barkley's words about A.J. Brown were the most honest and most revealing to come from any Eagles player this week. He made clear it is hard to say anything negative about the receiver, that Brown is one of his best friends in the sport, one of his favorite teammates he has ever been around, that the respect for him as a man is absolute. And then, without losing the thread, Barkley delivered the statement that summarizes exactly how a winning locker room processes the kind of situation the Eagles are living through right now. This is the business. It is the NFL. If he is not here, if Jalen is not here, whoever is not here, the show goes on. That is how the NFL operates. There is nothing to address. You go about your work and keep getting better. Whatever happens, it is above his pay grade. That phrase, above my pay grade, says more about the culture Nick Sirianni has built in this locker room than any statement from a coach or the front office could communicate. Barkley is not pretending the situation is simple. He is not dismissing the human impact of watching a friend being moved by financial and strategic decisions that are beyond any player's control, but he is communicating with clarity that the roster's focus is not on what might leave. It is on what can be built with what remains. And that is exactly the mentality a team needs when it is trying to get back to the Super Bowl after a season that did not end the way the available talent had promised. The context of the 2025 season is fundamental to understanding why Barkley's words carry that additional weight. Last season was, in terms of individual running back production, one of the most frustrating campaigns of his recent career. During a stretch when the team accumulated consecutive losses, Barkley was averaging just 3.4 yards per carry. Philadelphia was ranked 29th in the league in yards per game and the most dominant running back in the sport. Looked trapped inside a system that had lost the identity that made it unstoppable in 2024. The difference between an average of 179 rushing yards per game in 2024, the second best number in the NFL, and what the offense produced on the ground in 2025 was visible and painful for any fan who followed the season week by week. And that is exactly why the second part of Barkley's session with reporters is the most exciting thing for any Eagles fan. The running back did not walk out of OTAs talking only about the A.J. Brown drama. He walked out talking about concrete changes to the running game that Sean Mannion is installing, and that promise to transform what the offense will be capable of doing in 2026. The most significant change Barkley described is the addition of the outside zone as the central scheme of the running game. This is a real philosophical shift. The inside zone was the foundation of the Eagles' ground attack under the last few offensive coordinators, and it was within that system that Barkley had his historic 2024 season, leading the NFL in rushing yards with 2,338 and winning the Offensive Player of the Year award. But the outside zone is a different scheme. It demands a different type of read from the running back, a lateral processing ability as the offensive line creates the block in motion, and a different patience before finding the right crease. Barkley openly acknowledged that he is going to need to adjust his game to adapt to this new system. That honesty is not a sign of concern. It is the signal of a player who understands the craft deeply enough to recognize that any scheme change demands real adaptation work, regardless of how much talent the running back brings to the position. And what Barkley saw during the first full-team practice session gave concrete reasons for optimism. The offensive line opened a massive hole in the running game, and Barkley exploded through it with the speed and burst that any fan recognizes as the signature of the best running back in the world. That was a non-padded practice in May. But the explosion was there. The under-center looks are the second piece of the change that Barkley mentioned with enthusiasm. When the quarterback is under center instead of in the shotgun, the running attack gains a dimension of threat that the shotgun simply cannot replicate. Defenses must respect the play action in a completely different way. Linebackers become less comfortable with pre-snap reads, and the running back receives the ball under conditions that favor the offense in rushing sequences. For Barkley, who spent most of his professional life operating primarily out of shotgun formations with the New York Giants before arriving in Philadelphia, the combination of outside zone plus under-center looks represents an expanded offensive vocabulary that could become even harder to stop than what the Eagles already had. And Barkley did not leave OTAs only optimistic about the system. He left optimistic about the man installing it. The words the running back chose to describe Sean Mannion were specific and enthusiastic in a way that goes beyond standard locker room corporate protocol. Barkley said he is excited to work with Mannion, that the offensive coordinator has been doing a really good job, that he is extremely smart, that he works very hard, that the entire offensive staff, especially the new additions, is contributing positive energy to the process. And then he used a phrase that defines the current stage of the work. They are building the foundation, and it has been fun so far. Building the foundation. That is the most important statement Barkley made today, and it needs to be processed carefully. One of the most competitive and most demanding players in the entire NFL is describing the current process as fun. Not too difficult. Not too complicated. Not a hard transition. Fun. For a running back who finished the 2025 season with visible frustration about the state of the offense, that shift in tone is the kind of signal that experienced football fans know how to recognize as genuine. The list of players Barkley mentioned as examples of the type of mentality that makes the Eagles successful is equally revealing. Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith, Jordan Davis. 3 players representing 3 different parts of the roster, 3 leaders at 3 different positions, and 3 men Barkley publicly identified as the reason this team is going to adjust to the changes with focus and determination. The absence of A.J. Brown's name from that list was not an oversight. It was a conscious choice from a player who understands exactly what is being communicated in every word he chooses to say in front of cameras. The narrative Saquon Barkley is building at these OTAs is the narrative of a roster that processed what happened in 2025, that is actively working to correct it with a new system and a new offensive energy, and that is committed to the process in a way that what happens on the practice field is already confirming. The hole the offensive line opened in the first full-team contact session. The genuine enthusiasm around Mannion. The emotional clarity with which Barkley addressed the Brown situation. All of it together tells a more coherent and more positive story than anything the behind-the-scenes reporting published over the last few weeks about this team. With Saquon Barkley describing the outside zone as the new core of the running game, the offensive line opening holes from the very first full practice, and the energy surrounding Sean Mannion being described as genuinely exciting by the best running back in the NFL, do you believe the Eagles' offense in 2026 is going to be better than it was in 2025, even without A.J. Brown? Leave your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll be back later with the latest Eagles news.